City and state leaders in Los Angeles have accused President Trump of deliberately provoking chaos after a third day of protests descended into violence. Law enforcement officers fired tear gas and rubber bullets at crowds who'd gathered, while some protesters torched cars and tried to block a major road. Well, President Trump called for the National Guard to move in following earlier confrontations as immigration officers rounded up unauthorized migrants. The Los Angeles Police Department says that a phone alert's been sent to people in the Civic Center area declaring an unlawful assembly, with protesters told to leave. They also add that business owners are reporting looting. Well, our correspondent John Sudworth has the latest.
Once again, downtown Los Angeles echoed to the sound of tear gas and rubber bullets. At one point, protesters surged onto one of the city's busiest highways before the police eventually cleared the road. These were scenes that were repeated throughout the day.
Over the past few minutes, you can probably see the guy with the green gun there. He's been firing rubber bullets at the direction of the crowd, and it shows you just how volatile the situation is.
This, though, is what's turned the localized protests into a major story. President Trump's protocol-busting decision to send in the National Guard against the wishes of the state governor and the city's mayor.
Deploying federalized troops is a dangerous escalation, but we need to be real about this. This is about another agenda. It's not about public safety. There's clearly no plan, and there is clearly no policy.
Mr. Trump, though, insists the National Guard are needed to keep the peace.
I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
This Waymo self-driving car was set alight, another illustration of the sporadic violence. But the majority of protesters have been peaceful, many of them from the immigrant community themselves.
There's some people that they're working, not even for the minimum wage, but they have to work.
And what do you say when Donald Trump says, I have a mandate, I was elected on the promise of deporting people?
He's not the boss, only God.
The government, though, insists that the immigration raids will continue, and LA is bracing for more of this. John Sudworth, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Well, our reporter Carl Nasman's been monitoring events for us in Los Angeles. He's been speaking to my colleague Sally Bundock.
It's still a very fluid situation here tonight in Los Angeles. We've been watching as several police cars and helicopters above us are really trying to tackle some of these pockets of unrest that spread out across this area of downtown Los Angeles tonight. We've seen just in the past a few minutes or so several fires being set. There was a car driving through a crowd. It's just felt slightly out of control, if not very out of control at times. And this is all really spiraling from what we saw earlier today right here. This is Highway 101. This is going through the center of Los Angeles, and you can see here still a long line of police cars. These are California Highway Patrol vehicles. They are still parked there guarding the entrance to the highway here, and you can still see obviously that part of the freeway is still shut down to traffic. It's been like that for hours. They are struggling to get this back open. And even hours ago, there were still clashes between some of these patrol officers and demonstrators who were standing above these overpasses that go over the freeway in this section. We saw some very intense clashes. In fact, fires breaking out down below on top of and around some of these police vehicles. Eventually, it seemed police were able to gain the upper hand and move these demonstrators away from this area. That, though, spread some of the troublemakers and people that are out late into this night, really intent on continuing these demonstrations out into the further reaches of the city. But, you know, this is a scene right now where we've seen several dozen people arrested and the authorities right now trying to gain the upper hand. And of course, these are all scenes that we know President Trump will be following and will be watching. And this is something that he says he wants law and order on the streets. Officials here say they have it under control. But right now, the scenes that we're seeing play out certainly don't necessarily say that Los Angeles right now is a city that is necessarily calm.
And of course, President Trump made the very controversial step of sending in the National Guard on Sunday. Just describe how that has changed things and impacted the mood among demonstrators and protesters.
I was speaking with one demonstrator earlier on this afternoon, and she was very emotional, and she said really the spark for these protests across these 3 days in Los Angeles were those immigration enforcement actions that we saw at several locations in Los Angeles. This is a sanctuary city. It's a city made up of immigrants. It has one of the largest concentrations of undocumented migrants in the entire country. And so those immigration actions by those ICE agents, I think, really struck this community personally and struck it hard. But, that was a spark. But the fuel seems to be, at least if you talk to California officials, the president's decision to federalize some of these National Guard members, send them to Los Angeles, and have them symbolically, essentially, guard the federal buildings. Because it's interesting, I should say that even despite the amount of unrest that we have seen playing out this afternoon and this evening, we actually haven't seen the National Guard itself doing much of the responding. They're not the ones out here confronting protesters or demonstrators. They haven't been the ones really here to try to get things under control. They've mostly just been guarding the entrance to the Federal Detention Center, which is just across the highway here. So although it was a very symbolic move, it seems to be something that definitely inflamed tensions here, but it doesn't seem like they're actually playing that role of peacemaker like President Trump might have hoped.
Well, it's definitely inflamed tensions between Gavin Newsom and the president. That's California's governor, of course, Gavin Newsom, who is urging President Trump to revoke the troop deployment. But it would seem the White House is not willing to do that at this moment, saying they are rightfully stepping in to restore law and order. So a real stalemate there.
Even as we see the tension and the clashes playing out in the streets, we also have this war of words, don't we, between state officials like Gavin Newsom, the local mayor here, Karen Bass, and then the President of the United States. We heard from Gavin Newsom today saying he actually is considering suing the Trump administration tomorrow over that move of deploying California National Guard here into Los Angeles. That's a move that the governor says is his call to make, not the president's. So I think we could see some legal battles that will play out here. This is all kind of unprecedented territory. These are things we have not seen in many decades in the United States.